All right, I am so excited to get into this footage, get into an edit together. But before we get started, I wanted to sort of bring you on the journey of the sort of technical settings, all of the sort of project workflow that I start any project with. It doesn't matter about the style, the genre, whatever it is. These are the steps that I take at the beginning, taking just a raw hard drive of raw footage and getting a project set up so that all the pieces are in place for success throughout the whole process. So we're gonna jump straight over to the computer here and let's get started. All right, so the very first thing that we're gonna do is obviously we've got, our footage here, we've got our music, just a couple, tracks that I've already pulled for some inspiration, and we are gonna open Premiere. And I wanna sort of, again, show you exactly what I do to make sure that these settings are right from the get-go. So that we're not running into issues down the line. So obviously the very first thing we're gonna do is hit New Project, and we're gonna name this Stairway to Heaven because I know the name of the project. Obviously we're gonna change the location of this now. So we're gonna go to the root folder where our footage and our music are right now. We're going to create a brand new folder called Premiere so that the footage, the music, and the project files all live in the same place. There's nothing worse than having the sort of default location for your Premiere file and you have no idea where it is and you're trying to relink it and find it and all that stuff. So right off the bat, we're going to choose that proper location, hit choose, Stairway to Heaven, and ignore all this pretty much, and we can hit OK. So here we are in a completely blank canvas. And obviously the first thing we want to do is we want to go back to Finder, and we're literally just going to drag in our footage folder just like it is right here. And we're going to see this little error window here in the beginning, and I'm expecting that, right? So, right here you're going to see file import failure. And this is because the camera that we're shooting with, the Alexa Mini, generates these additional data files that don't really matter to us. They're basically for the purpose of interpreting settings on the camera itself. So we can hit OK, not worry about that. Okay, so if we toggle this down, we're gonna see our footage here exactly like it was. All of our clips are ready to go. We can actually just open all of these, but you're gonna see right off the bat that we're getting these weird sort of like question mark files as if something's missing. And again, really, this is just sort of based on the camera that you're shooting with. You might get this every once in a while because it's just an additional sort of piece of data that we can actually remove from Premiere at this point to make sure that things are nice and organized. So, you could obviously click and then, go down the line, or you could, delete, 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 delete. That's going to be kind of annoying, right? So this is where we can kind of use our metadata and start sorting things to make our process a little bit quicker right off the bat. If we scroll to the right here, you're going to see that, whether it's the audio info or the tape name, we basically just need to find something that's, we need to find somewhere where we can sort where it's going to do that sort of alternating for us. So if I click on tape name right here, you can see now that all of the question marks are grouped together. We're going to delete this. And again, this might not happen on your camera, but figured it was worth kind of discussing. I know, happy accidents are a big part of my process, like we talked about earlier. But, straight off the bat here at the beginning of a project, I do like to stay pretty organized. So we're going to keep this clean for as long as possible. It might not be as long as I would like, but here we go. All right, so almost done here. Just a couple more. All right, so all of our footage is good. And I want to show you in a couple of videos, I want to show you the process that I use called the selects method. And that's the method that I use to sort my footage, find the good stuff that I'm going to take into my edit. When I was first getting started, I would sort of just click through each of these clips and find an in point and an out point. And then later on in the process, I wouldn't know where things were that I knew that I had shot. And so I want to show you a much better way of working. But of course, the very first thing that we have to do is we do have to create a timeline. And, there's a couple ways to do this. The one way is to go to File, New, Sequence, and then you get all these, this whole dialog box, giving you all these crazy options. And there's a ton of settings that you can, dial in with tracks and VR videos and all this stuff. And that's great. But you can get really thrown off. And if you get your sequence settings different than what your footage is, things could be jittery or, cause a lot of technical issues and you won't know what's happening. And so there's actually a much better way of doing it and a much more efficient way. We're going to hit cancel. We're going to drag this first piece of footage right here over this new icon right here. And when we do that, it's going to create this perfect sequence for us with all of the settings already dialed in that perfectly match that clip that we just dragged on, right? So if we go to sequence and then go to sequence settings, we're now going to see that we have a 23.976 frames per second, 4K, which is 3840 by 2160, progressive, 709. All the settings are built in. We have everything sort of set up for us that perfectly matches that clip. And so we can actually just hit OK. We are good to go. And that just gives you that assurance that what you're working with is exactly, the way it should be, right? You're not going to have any sort of weird stuff that's out of sync. So, for the sake of staying organized here as long as possible, we are going to put the sequence on its own in a bin of its own called sequences. And to do that, we're just going to click on this little folder icon right here, which is the new bin icon. We're going to click that. We're going to call this sequences, and we're going to drag this sequence right up here. And we're going to name this sequence the all sequence. And the reason for that is because we're about to take all of our footage and drop it into this sequence where we have a place where we can visually reference all of our footage, for the entirety of the process of this project. So what we're going to do is we're literally just going to take, all of the footage. We're going to take this, we're going to scroll all the way down. We're going to shift click on this last clip right here. We're going to drag it straight onto the timeline. And then boom, when we zoom out using the minus key, we see that we have every single clip from our project right here on the timeline. There's one more thing that, again, for this camera specifically, I'm going to do. We're shooting with the Alexa Mini, which in this case, you can see there's a really sort of contrasty LUT that's built into that footage. Super helpful for when you're shooting on set, but now that we're in the edit, we want to make sure that we have full control over the color, over all that kind of stuff. And so what we're going to do is we're going to right click on all this footage that's been selected. We're going to hit modify. We're going to hit interpret footage. And then right here under color management, we're going to go to this input LUT. We're going to change this to none. So right off the bat, again, you're going to see that all becomes nice and creamy, a lot less low contrast. We can add that contrast back in later on, but if trying to remove contrast later on is not a good idea. It's not super easy. All right, so we've got all of our technical stuff out of the way. The next thing that I want to show you before we get too far is how to work with these big 4K files on a computer that may not be able to handle it as well as you want to, especially once we get to effects and plugins and all that kind of stuff. So let's jump into our video on proxies, and in the meantime, happy editing.